This episode of the PDB is brought to you by Patriot Gold Group. Protect your retirement assets and protect your future. Speak to the experts at Patriot Gold. Patriots protecting patriots. Top-rated gold IRA dealer for 7 years in a row. That's right. They're the top-rated gold IRA dealer for 7 years in a row. I just repeated myself. Go to patriotgoldgroup.com or call 1-888-621-3856 for a free investor guide. It's Monday, August 5th. Welcome to the President's Daily Brief. I'm Mike Baker, your eyes and ears on the world stage. Let's get briefed. As the world anticipates Iran's expected attack on Israel, the U.S. military has announced that it's sending additional warships and fighter jets to the Middle East to bolster defenses. I'll have the details on that. Later in the show, an update on the plea deal for the accused mastermind of the 9/11 attacks and two cohorts. After significant ridicule, disgust, and bewilderment, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has revoked the agreement and pulled the responsible official off the case. Plus, large-scale riots are hitting the UK following the murder of 3 young girls at a dance school in northwest England. And in today's back of the brief, an update on the deadly 2023 wildfires in Maui, as Hawaii's governor announces a historic $4 billion settlement to resolve claims arising from the tragic fires. While the story has largely been forgotten, it seems, by the outside world, the local communities are still trying to recover and rebuild. But first, today's PDB Spotlight. The world is bracing for Iran's promised retaliation following the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran last week. In a fiery statement on Saturday, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, vowed severe revenge, warning the, quote, terrorist Zionist regime to expect retribution at a time, place, and manner of their choosing. Now, the irony of the largest state sponsor of terror, which itself has built a network of terrorist organizations calling Israel a terrorist regime, is apparently lost on the IRGC and mullahs. Then again, they're not really known for introspection and self-awareness. Now, to my point, Iran isn't the only player in the region that Israel has to worry about, as the Islamic Republic is now vowing that its proxies, those organizations in the terrorist ilk that they have built, funded, trained, and resourced, will also join in on the attack. Iran's permanent mission to the United Nations told CBS News last week that Hezbollah would now begin deliberately targeting Israeli citizens, claiming that it hadn't done so until now. Seriously, they said that with a straight face. The Lebanese-based terrorist group's announcement comes as a response to the assassination of its commander, Fuad Shukr. Meanwhile, the U.S. is also responding to the threats from Iran and its regional allies. The Pentagon has announced that it will be deploying additional forces to the Middle East as Washington seeks to augment Israel's defenses following the threats from Iran. According to a statement from the Pentagon, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin signed off on sending additional Navy cruisers and destroyers to the Middle East and Europe. The military is also sending an additional squadron of fighter jets to the Middle East. The statement said the move was, quote, designed to improve U.S. force protection, to increase support for the defense of Israel, and to ensure the United States is prepared to respond to various contingencies, end quote. So let's see, cruisers, destroyers, jets. You ask yourself, what do these things all have in common? Well, they can all shoot down ballistic missiles, meaning the U.S. and Israel are preparing for something of a repeat of Iran's strike back in April, when it launched more than 300 drones and missiles at Israel. Israel successfully knocked down almost all of the weapons fired at its territory, with the help, of course, of the United States, Jordan, and other allies. However, this time around, the Iranian response is expected to be more intense. An Israeli official told CBS News that while Iran's last attack was thwarted, Israel was anticipating a more aggressive retaliation this time around, which could extend to Israeli interests beyond their borders. Now, if you want more insight into what the coming attack on Israel could look like, please check out my interview with Benem Bentaleblu from this weekend's PDB Situation Report. You can listen to that on any podcast platform or watch it on our YouTube channel at President's Daily Brief. All right, coming up next, U.S. Defense Secretary Austin steps in to revoke the controversial plea deal for the accused 9/11 mastermind and his cohorts that took the death penalty off the table. Plus, we'll examine the chaos and outrage fueling riots in the UK after the murder of 3 school-age girls at a dance school. We'll have those stories when we come back. Welcome back to the PDB. In a memo issued on Friday, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin rescinded a controversial plea deal related to the accused masterminds of the 9/11 attacks. This decision reverses an earlier agreement that would have spared the defendants from the death penalty, a move criticized by many victims' families and anyone with common sense and a desire for justice. The plea agreement involved Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, KSM, the accused planner of the 9/11 attacks. Yeah, you wouldn't want to keep the death penalty on the table for him, which killed nearly 3,000 people and were the deadliest on U.S. soil since Pearl Harbor. Mohammed, along with Walid bin Atash and Mustafa al-Hawsawi, agreed to a plea deal last week that would have sentenced them to life in prison instead of facing full trials and possible death penalties in exchange for admitting their roles in the terror attacks. Defense Secretary Austin's memo to retired Brigadier General Susan Escalier, who had approved the plea deal, states his decision to take over responsibility for the cases under the Military Commissions Act of 2009. Austin wrote, quote, "I have determined that in light of the significance of the decision to enter into pre-trial agreements with the accused, responsibility for such a decision should rest with me," end quote. The plea deal's withdrawal reignited the debate over the pursuit of justice versus the need for closure and finality. Criticism from some 9/11 victims' families who opposed the plea deal claimed it would preclude the possibility of full trials and death penalties. Brett Eagleson, president of 9/11 Justice, that's an organization of survivors of the attacks, expressed frustration over the lack of consultation with the victims' families, stating, quote, "These monsters need to be forced to share every piece of information they have about the attacks and be held fully accountable," end quote. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan clarified the White House had no role in the original agreement. We had nothing to do with anything over here at the White House. However, President Biden, or whomever is running the White House currently, has directed his team to consult with the Department of Defense for more information regarding the plea deal. The U.S. Military Commission handling the 9/11 defendants' cases has been stalled in pretrial proceedings since 2008. Now, the interrogations of the defendants while in CIA custody has hindered progress, raising doubts about the possibility of full trials and verdicts due to the possible inadmissibility of evidence linked to the interrogations. Mohammed and his co-defendants were anticipated to formally enter their pleas under the now voided agreement as early as next week. The plea deal's revocation marks a pivotal moment in the long-standing quest for justice following the 9/11 attacks, and believe it or not, that was nearly 23 years ago. Okay, moving on to the UK, where residents in several cities woke up Sunday morning to streets covered in debris and smoldering trash following days of demonstrations. These protests, reportedly stoked by misinformation or disinformation spread on social media, erupted into violence in cities across the nation. Tensions have been high following the tragic murder of 3 young girls at a Taylor Swift-themed dance party in Southport, Merseyside last week. The incident ignited anti-immigration protests fueled by social media posts claiming that the perpetrator was Muslim or an asylum seeker. For example, early reports on social media claimed that the alleged killer was an immigrant named Ali al-Shakati. In reality, the name appears to have been completely made up. In fact, the suspect is a 17-year-old named Axel Rudekubanam, who was actually born in Cardiff and is a British citizen. The suspect appeared in Liverpool Magistrates Court and later Liverpool Crown Court on Thursday, charged with 3 counts of murder, 10 counts of attempted murder, and possession of a knife. He'll remain in custody until a further hearing in October. Police confirm there's no clear indication yet of any motive. Now, the misinformation about the alleged murderer led to police arresting at least 100 anti-immigration demonstrators in London, with riot police deployed across major cities. Leeds saw groups waving St. George's Cross flags and shouting anti-Muslim slurs. In Hull, demonstrators clashed with police and vandalized a hotel housing asylum seekers. In Liverpool, 2 officers were hospitalized after being attacked as a library was set ablaze and shops were looted by demonstrators. In Southport, over 50 officers were injured. However, some of the demonstrations were peaceful. In Bristol, anti-immigration groups shouted, quote, "We want our country back," while others chanted, quote, "England till I die," end quote. The newly seated Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, condemned the violence and announced the formation of a national police unit to act against what he called, quote, "extremists seeking to sow hate." Starmer emphasized the distinction between the right to freedom of expression and violent disorder. Policing Minister Diana Johnson confirmed the government's commitment to a, quote, "nick them quick" approach, ensuring rioters are quickly removed from the streets to deter further disorder. Courts are set to operate 24 hours to expedite legal processes. Now, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper warned of severe repercussions, including imprisonment and travel bans for those participating in the unrest. Prime Minister Starmer criticized social media companies for their role in spreading misinformation that incites violence. Discussions with social media companies are ongoing to curb misinformation that could fuel more unrest. Now, the protests are expected to continue into the week, albeit on a smaller scale, following widespread arrests. Authorities remain on high alert, with additional prosecutors and police reinforcements prepared to maintain order and address any further violence. All right. Coming up in the back of the brief, a major update on the devastating 2023 wildfires in Maui. Hawaii's governor announces a groundbreaking $4 billion settlement to address claims from the tragic fires. I'll be right back. In today's Back of the Brief, I want to give you a quick update on a story we've been following for the better part of a year now, and that would be the devastating Maui wildfires that took place back in August of last year. I think it's important to keep a spotlight on Maui, given the devastation caused by the fires and the fact that much of the affected population is still working to rebuild their lives and livelihoods. Hawaii Governor Josh Green announced a landmark $4 billion settlement for over 2,000 claimants who were affected by the blazes. The proposed settlement aims to resolve about 450 lawsuits filed by homeowners and businesses impacted by the fires in Lahaina and upcountry Maui. The wildfires, which are the deadliest in modern American history, caused damages estimated at $5 billion, resulting in over 100 fatalities and over 10,000 residents displaced. The lawsuits were directed against 7 defendants: Hawaiian Electric, which is the primary defendant, the state of Hawaii, the county of Maui, Kamehameha Schools, West Maui Land Company, Hawaiian Telecom, and Spectrum Charter Communications. These parties engaged in significant negotiations to address the needs of all the affected parties. Now, the settlement remains an agreement in principle, pending final court and legislative approval. If confirmed through judicial and legislative processes, payments are anticipated to commence by mid-2025. Governor Green said that a swift resolution is important to ensure resources reach the affected individuals without delay. Well, it's already been a year, so I guess we've already had a delay. However, Green, to the contrary, said, quote, "Settling a matter like this within a year is unprecedented, and it will be good that our people don't have to wait to rebuild their lives as long as others have in many places that have had suffered similar tragedies," end quote. As the community approaches the 1-year mark since the wildfires, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives has finished its report on what caused the deadly Lahaina wildfires, but the public won't have access to it until the Maui Fire Department decides to release it, with no timeline specified. And that, my friends, is the President's Daily Brief for Monday, 5 August. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. We love to get your comments. Now, to listen to the show ad-free, become a premium member of the President's Daily Brief by visiting pdbpremium.com. And I hope you've had a chance now to check out this past weekend's episode of the PDB's Situation Report. We had two great guests, Iran expert Behnam Bentaleblu from the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies and Juan Ferrero, Wall Street Journal bureau chief for South America. We went into detail on Iran's threats of retaliation against Israel, the continuing protests in Venezuela against Maduro's claimed election victory, and the prisoner swap with Russia that saw Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, former Marine Paul Whelan, and others finally returning home. Now you could find that episode and all our episodes on our YouTube channel at President's Daily Brief and all podcast platforms. I'm Mike Baker, and I'll be back later today with the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool.